I want to thank you all for coming. Should be a wonderful presentation. Dr. Gary Lynn is an associate professor at Stevens Institute, and he's authored or co-authored 4 books, 40 refereed publications on new product development, and he has started, built, and sold 3 companies, though he has some experience in innovative product areas. He's also served on the board of the IEEE Engineering Management Society, an organization familiar to some of you. He was an officer for the American Marketing Association, the American Society for Engineering Management, and the Product Development and Management Association, so he's worked with people in industry for some time. Dr. Lynn also has been awarded the Best Professor Award at Stevens, the Merritt Williamson Best Paper Award by the American Society for Engineering Management, and been quoted many times in Business Week, Chicago Tribune, and on CNN, and has done more than 50 radio talk shows around the country. He's a Nobel Medal holder, and he's here to discuss the groundbreaking study of practices that help teams develop and launch extremely successful new products. You know what products these are. You use them every day. His most recent book, Blockbusters, co-authored with Dr. Richard Riley, is based on a 10-year study of over 700 new product teams in several different industries. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Gary Lynn.
How many of you are Nobel Medal holders? Winning the Nobel Prize is no easy feat. Now, my main field is marketing. Any marketers here? Anybody in marketing? Okay. How about engineering? Any engineers? Oh, great. A lot of engineers. Well, in new product development, some amount of friction can develop between the marketers and the engineers. Why? Because marketing tends to stretch the truth just a little bit, and then engineering has to deliver, right? Okay. Before I get too far, I need to clarify a little something that Art said before about being the Nobel Medal holder. A year ago, I was giving a presentation on a symposium on innovation, and Alan McDermott, the 2000 Nobel Medal winner in chemistry, was also there. After I had presented, Alan asked me if I wanted to see his Nobel Prize, and I said, sure. So he then takes it out of the box. It was this beautiful red velvet box, and he takes it out. He takes out this solid gold medal, and he asked me if I wanted to hold it. I said, yes. So I'm looking at it, and I'm holding it. He said, Gary, now you are a Nobel Medal holder. A Nobel Medal holder, not Nobel Medal winner. It's just a slight difference. And I wanted to clear the air there so that we were on solid footing. Okay? What I'd also like to do is I would like to try to put your new product development projects on more solid footing. Great companies succeed and endure because they continually produce great products. Companies fail because they have forgotten this simple truth. Manipulating inventory values, accelerating depreciation schedules, or moving corporate headquarters offshore does little if a company's products and services are substandard. Okay? Even establishing world-class customer service will do very little good. If companies want to succeed, they do that by creating great products. This is the heart and soul of any great company. Take a look at the Motorola legacy. Motorola produced the first two-way handheld radio called the Handy Talkie for the U.S. Army. Produced the first FM two-way radio. The first pager to be widely used by business and industry. The first mass-produced semiconductor. The Microtech cell phone, the smallest, lightest cell phone on the market at the time. And the first company to successfully combine silicon and gallium arsenide on a semiconductor chip. Amazing accomplishments. Today I'm going to share with you the 5 keys to being able to consistently develop and launch these types of projects. Now I have some good news and some bad news. The good news is there are only 5 of them. The bad news is you have to do them all. Based on our 10-year research, I can tell you that if you ignore them or you fail to do them well, your chances of failure are almost 100%. If, however, you do them and you excel at them, your chances of failure are only 2%. and every one of these practices are within your control. Innovation is important. It can create entirely new industries and change the dynamics in current industries. AT&T's transistor, your cellular telephone, Corning's optical fibers, global positioning system helped us win the Gulf War, and I-Omega zip drive. On one hand, they're important, but perhaps one reason why we're all here today is because we know that they're important, but they're problematic also. Polaroid wrote off $197 million on its Polar Vision instant movies. Next lost $250 million on its workstation. Federal Express $294 million on Zapmail. GM $420 million on Wankel. And DuPont lost close to $1 billion on its Corfan, which was its leather substitute. Xerox invented the PC but failed to commercialize on it. If you take a look at failure rates of new products over the last 40 years from credible studies that were done, we see that failure rates are not going down, and arguably they're going up. So at the Stevens Institute, we tried to find out how, not just how can companies innovate more successfully, but how can they launch extraordinarily successful blockbuster products. And it took us 10 years to answer that question. Now, typically when you do research in new products, there's two types. You either use an academic approach or a practitioner approach, and both have some limitations. In the practitioner model, you study something called the nearest neighbor, the most recent success usually. This has two limitations. First of all, the most recent success very likely does not represent best practice. And the second limitation is unless you compare that against failures, what you think are critical might very well not be critical at all. In the academic model, it compensates for some of those limitations, but there's still some limitations. And the limitation are, what happens in the academic model is they study both successes and failures. But the problem is, then they make an arbitrary cutoff on what is, quote, best. Best can be anywhere from above the mean to the top 10%, top 20%. And the problem with this approach is that it's usually a function of the sample that they study. So if you're looking at the internet service sector, what's, quote, best practice might not be very good at all. So what we did was we used the advantages of both without the limitations of each. We took a look at a broad range of both successful and unsuccessful products, and we studied 49 blockbusters. These were projects that scored 10 across the board in terms of exceeding customer satisfaction, exceeding management expectation, exceeding research return on investment, volume, profits, sales expectations. Plus, they had to win an industry or an internal award for excellence, like a chairman's award or a president's award. These were truly best-in-breed teams. Our goal was to try to figure out what were the best from the rest. Some blockbuster products that we studied included the Apple IIe, the Black & Decker Dustbuster, Motorola StarTAC, Colgate Total Toothpaste. Colgate Total Toothpaste knocked Crest out of its #1 position that Crest had held for over 30 years, and many other household products. Some participating companies that we studied included from the largest of Apple and IBM and AT&T to very small startup companies with 1 and 2 people in the garage. And what we did was we created 3 buckets of products. The first bucket were blockbusters, the ones that scored 10 across the board, plus they got the industry award. The second bucket were merely successful projects. These were projects that were successful, but were not singled out for excellence. And the final bucket were downright failures. We studied projects that ranged from army tanks to chewing gum. And we learned that there were 5 practices that separate not only the best from the failure, but they separated the best of the best. What do you think those 5 were? 5 practices of blockbusters. Yes? Management involvement. That was 1. What else? Shared vision. That's 2.
Rapid test
That's 3. Rapid testing. That's part of rapid testing. Part of rapid testing. 2 more. Part of vision. Okay? A what? Created a new need. Part of vision. Okay, here the 5 were. The first was the involvement of senior management. The second was the vision, what we call project pillars. The third was lickety-stick, or how they moved from concept to market. The fourth was information exchange, how the team shared information. And the final was how they collaborated and worked toward a unified goal. Now, Andy Grove, the chairman of the board of Intel, says academics know what, but they don't know how. This is the what of blockbuster new products, and now I'm going to tell you the how. I'm going to cover each one in a little more depth. The first practice is senior management involvement. This was actually our most surprising finding. What we thought that senior management would be in a new product team is they would be distant, provide the funding, and then get out of the way. But what we found was in the blockbuster team, so we separated these into 3 buckets. The blockbusters, the merely successful, and the failure. The blockbusters were 3 times more likely to have intimate and active senior management involvement on the team than the failures, and 1/3 more likely to have intimate and active senior management involvement than the merely successful. Now, these are all these differences that I'm going to talk to you about are statistically significant at the 0.05 level or less, which means we can have a high level of confidence that what we're seeing is in fact the case. As you think of senior management involvement, you typically think the conventional wisdom tells us that micromanagement is bad. That kills the innovation process. Empowerment is good. And the preferred method of management is management by walking around. Management kind of sprinkles their wisdom like fairy dust on the team. But that is not what was happening on these blockbuster teams. There was micromanagement going on. The senior executive, division manager, senior director, vice president, sometimes the CEO of a Fortune 100 company was making the tough decisions on the team. What name to use, what advertising to use, what features and benefits should be on or off the project. Empowerment. A lot of companies say empowerment is good. But typically they're reluctant to empower the teams, and sometimes for good reason. Because the team's vision can expand beyond what was originally thought, their budget and their scope can expand, and as a result, the team can really end up doing something that it wasn't supposed to do. What we found on these blockbuster teams was the teams were empowered, but not because they were given the power from the company, but they had the power on the team in the form of these senior managers. And they weren't practicing management by walking around. They were practicing management by coaching. They were there rolling up their sleeves, helping the team do what needed to be done. The role was not of that as a hole poker or a devil's advocate. Rest assured, the team knows where the holes are. They don't need somebody over their shoulder pointing out where they're at. They need help filling the holes, and that's what the senior managers did. And I'll tell you a story about Colgate's development of Total toothpaste. Colgate Total was the best-selling product not just in health and beauty aids, but in the entire store, outselling milk and razor blades. And they were able to be successful because of the intimate and active involvement of senior management. So the takeaway is that blockbuster innovation is a high-contact sport, that top management must be involved. But sometimes senior management thinks that their involvement is a double-edged sword, that they can ensure success or ensure failure, and that's not true. They can ensure failure by sabotaging the team, by changing the vision, by transferring people on and off the team, by changing funding levels. But they cannot ensure success. It's only one of a component of things that must be in the picture. which brings in the next practice. And the next practice is having clear and stable project pillars. Of all the practices, this practice is the most important. We found this time after time on these blockbuster programs was that all the team members had this clear sense of what the project was supposed to be. Now, project pillars differ from vision. What vision at the corporate level is, it's this vague, kind of broad dream that provides very gentle guidance. Project pillars also differ from specifications because where specifications focus on features, the project pillars concentrate on benefits. Oh, and the blockbusters were 3 times more likely to have clear and stable vision than the failures, and 1.4 times more likely to have clear and stable vision than the merely successful. Having these pillars allowed the team to understand what their task was. When difficult decisions came on the team, these allowed them to filter what actions they need to have. So having such clear project pillars enabled the team to stay focused and to win in the marketplace. The third is the process by which the blockbuster teams followed from concept through to launch. And what we found here was the process that the blockbuster used was kind of like the process that you use to figure out if spaghetti is done. You know how you know when spaghetti is done? That's right. You throw it up against the wall. When it's fixed, it's done. And we found that what these teams did was they threw rough prototypes, concept sketches, out against the proverbial wall, being the market, and they figured out, oh, that didn't stick. They brought it back quickly, changed it, and got it back out against the wall, lickety, until it sticks. Okay, lickety stick. And we found that the blockbuster teams did this 2 times more frequently than the failures, and 1.5 times more frequently than the failures, than the merely successful projects. Oh, what we did find was that, I understand you use an M-gate system in your new product development process. In the commercial sector, in other companies, they call that the phased review or a stage gate, where a project goes through several different stages. Screening, idea generation, screening and evaluation, development, testing, and launch. And you usually have review gates between stages. Your management gets together and you make a go-kill decision. Does that sound something that's familiar to yours? Okay. What we found was that the blockbuster teams, they did the phases correctly and proficiently. But what they didn't do were the gate reviews. And we really researched this to make sure that we were understanding what they were doing. And what they were doing is they were operating less like a toll gate system on a highway, like the stage gate system, and more like an easy pass. So it was go and how fast. They were relying more on project management tools so they could track the project's costs and the project's progress. They were using this lickety-stick process that includes 2 components. The first is mean time to first prototype. How long did it take them to get that first prototype out against the proverbial wall? And the blockbuster teams did this in weeks, not months or years. Slap something together to get it out into the marketplace. And the second aspect is mean time between prototypes. How long did it take them to iterate, to get that back in, change it, and get it back out? Okay, so the takeaway on the lickety-stick process is it's important to do the upfront homework well so that it is a go. To give the team hard and urgent deadlines, to rely on project management tools and techniques so you know where the project is, and use this lickety-stick process that includes mean time to first prototype and mean time between prototypes. The fourth practice is having a good way to share information among the team. What we found was the way that they shared information was 2 ways. The first is what's called transactive memory, and the second is called mechanistic memory. The last practice, no discussion on teams would be complete, on new product development would be complete without talking about teams, because you have the engineers and the marketers and the manufacturers, they all have their own agenda. But what we found on the blockbuster teams, the blockbusters were 3 times more likely to have teams feel like they were working together, helping to resolve conflicts easily and effectively, and working toward a unified goal than the failures, and 36% more likely to have good teamwork than the merely successful projects. The trick is how they did this. How do you think they accomplished this great teamwork? I mean, it's such an easy term, teamwork. But how does that really happen? So you might be saying, Gary, you know what? These things are obvious, like motherhood and apple pie. So with that, I would like you to do this simple exercise in your next team meeting on your next new product team. When you all get together, and this will only take about 15 minutes. When you all get together, ask everybody what the pillars are for the project. If you cannot come up with consensus in 15 minutes, don't spend hours and hours trying to do it. It won't happen. What we found was teams wanted to know where they stood in the different practices, how well they were doing with the pillars, how well was their team functioning. So we created something called an innovation report card that allowed a team to see how well they were doing in each of the practices. And this was the report card that we did for the IBM PC team. We have the different practices here. This is management's support and involvement. This is the project pillars, vision clarity and vision stability. This is the lickety-stick process. This is information exchange, recording, reviewing, and filing. Now, back when we did this, which was several years ago, we did not know at that time that teamwork was one of the 5. So that's why teamwork is not here. And the concept is that if you do these things well, that your outcome variables should improve, being speed and success. Speed is so important today that we were measuring how they did. And what happens here is if a team scores in the top 10%, they would get an A, between 70 and 90% a B, 30 and 70% a C, 10 to 30% a D, and 0 to 10 an F. My students wish my grading was this lenient, all right? And what we found is it's very difficult to get an A. If you score an A, the team has a gem, as one of the project managers told us. They have a gem, and it's important that the company share these gems across different teams. So we went through and we created a bunch of video clips of a bunch of team members, and I'm going to share with you a video clip of Dave O'Connor. Dave was one of the senior engineers on the IBM PC, and he's going to talk about how the vision, the clarity of the vision and the pillars.
The vision of the PC was very clearly defined relative to who we were going to sell it to and the price point that was established. Price point had to be exactly the same as the Apple II, and the specification was clearly defined. We knew what technology would be available and when we needed to ship it. We knew we had to deliver the product in 12 months to get IBM into the game. Apple had clearly stolen the show and had a lead in the new personal computer market, and IBM had to catch up. So that was a motivation to do it in 12 months.
You could hear the pillars. There were 2 pillars, beat Apple and do it in 12 months. That helped the team focus on what they were trying to do. So the takeaway is that good practices are associated with good outcomes. I think you would agree, right? Would you agree? Okay, good. All right. Not always, okay? Teams can succeed with poor practices, but it will be painful. And we came to this realization with this team that we studied for a Fortune 100 company that makes consumer non-durables. This one really vexed us. We couldn't figure out how they were able to be so successful with such poor practices. Can anybody take a guess at how they were able to succeed? Maria can't, okay, because she knows the story a little bit, okay? Can anybody, and Art, you can't either, all right? Can anybody figure out, and you've probably worked on projects like this that didn't have management support. The vision was changing as you moved along. So how do you think they succeeded? Yes? Okay, other than that, okay, it was the only product like its kind. Actually, this was not so technologically, it was technologically advanced, but that was transparent to the customer, so that really didn't do it. Yes.
A couple of real strong believers in the product inside the team that are going to succeed regardless?
That actually gets at part of it. The team worked their tails off. They worked 100 hours a week. This Herculean effort allowed them to push this big boulder over the hill and be able to be so successful in the market. The point is the Chinese have a saying that says, if you have a choice between water and wine, which would you choose? That's a rhetorical question. I don't want this audience to answer that, all right? The unenlightened choose wine because you drink it, you start feeling great. The enlightened choose water because with water, it doesn't give you that sense of euphoria, but you can drink it day in and day out, no problem. Similarly, the 5 practices are like the water for new product development. You don't want to build a business on a profile like this, causing your team to go through all of this pain, because what happens, and I know many of you have worked on projects like this before, what happens to the team and you having done this kind of a project? That's exactly right. It's major burnout. You lose people. It's just a problem. You don't want to build a business on poor practice. So the implications for if you want to have a blockbuster are several. Number one, to get senior management involved and committed. To establish this consummate customer empathy so that you know the customer almost better than they know themselves. Now, that's easily said than done, and this is some of the things that happen to get the pillars. How do you get this consummate customer empathy? Yes. Right. You spend some time with them. You do not get this by hiring a market consulting company, have them produce, go out there and they do what they do. My main field is marketing, so I know what they do. Go out, do the report, give the report to the team reads it, and voila, they have consummate customer empathy. It does not happen that way. There are several ways by which you can get customer empathy. One way is to design a product that the designers want themselves. Okay? Now, how did Motorola get in the extremely successful talk about business? How did they do it? Team members were working on the P200, a business two-way radio that weighs about, how much does this weigh? Like 10 pounds? Okay. Cost $700 approximately, $700. So what were the team that was working on this? What were they doing with this? They were taking them on ski trips. They were giving them to all their friends, and they were all talking to each other. They say, "This is the greatest thing." I mean, they could talk. They knew where everybody was on the slopes. From this came this. All right? In their wildest dreams, they thought if they sold 1 million units a year, that would be tremendous. Do you know how many of these were sold last year? 12 million. You know how many Motorola sold? 6 million. If you would have done a marketing research report, do you think they would have come up that this has a market? No. Because they were designing a product that they themselves wanted, helped these blockbuster teams have this customer empathy. Establish project pillars and an early deadline and a hard deadline. Get the team to buy into the pillars and the deadline. Use this lickety-stick process that includes mean time between prototypes and mean time to first prototype. Select 8 team members and conduct frequent and regular team meetings with adequate documentation. This does not mean copious minutes to the meetings. That's what we did not find. We found that they did document the meetings, but it was only major decisions that were made and action items. Who was going to do what? Innovation is not rocket science. I know I do a lot of work with companies that are doing rocket science, and this isn't it. It requires attention to only 5 practices. The first is senior management involvement. The second is clear and stable pillars. The third is a process that gets you from concept to market quickly. The fourth is a good way to share information. And the fifth is teams that feel like they're working toward a unified goal. If you do this, our research has shown that if you don't do these 5 practices, your chances of success are less than 1%. If, however, you do them, and you do them very, very well, your chances of success increase to 98%, and your chances of launching a blockbuster increase to 72%. What I've tried to do is to share with you both the what as well as the how. The rest is up to you. Thanks.